Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back, everyone. Last time, we started tracing this huge story of what we called love initiated.
That's right. We looked at how God created everything and then established these foundational covenants. It was his way of, keeping the relationship going with humanity even after sin entered the picture.
And a covenant is a promise meant to be kept. But the thing is, we humans are, well, notoriously bad at that. I mean, as you read through the historical books, you find yourself just constantly asking, how could they do this again? You see Israel just betraying God over and over.
And that's exactly where today's deep dive begins. The historical books, that's Joshua all the way through Malachi, they really track this constant human failure.
So what's our mission today?
We're going to dig into the narrative of God's persistent love through all of that. We're calling it unyielding true love. It's the story of the one who never, ever gives up, even when things look completely hopeless.
It's a story of an agape that just covers failure and keeps renewing the promise.
Precisely.
So let's start at the beginning of that period. They're entering the promised land. What's the theological foundation here? The sources make it pretty clear they weren't chosen because they were the best or strongest.
Not at all. It was unconditional grace. But there was a huge purpose attached to that grace. It wasn't just for them.
What do you mean?
They were called to be the priestly nation.
The priestly nation. So their job was to be a channel, right? To convey God's love to the rest of the world.
Exactly. They weren't meant to be some kind of exclusive club. They were supposed to be a lighthouse for everyone else.
I like that. A lighthouse.
Yeah. And Christopher Wright really highlights this. He says their selection was never a privilege to be, hoarded. It was a missionary responsibility for all nations.
So the historical books are really the story of them forgetting that mission.
Over and over. And it's also the story of God's faithful and sometimes really difficult struggle to fulfill his global purpose through them, despite their constant forgetting.
And that forgetting, it starts almost immediately. We get into the settlement period, Joshua judges Ruth, and right after they arrive, the first major failure happens.
It does. They win the big battles, they settle the land, but they fail to completely drive out the Canaanites.
And that one tactical mistake, it just explodes.
It becomes an immediate spiritual crisis. They start to assimilate, they get infected with the local idol worship, and this is what kicks off that horrible downward spiral you see all through the book of Judges.
Oh, Judges is just shocking. It's a book of pure chaos, a nation that just seems to forget who they are almost overnight.
It is, but through that chaos, what's the divine reaction? That's where you see this unyielding love theme really start to shine. God never just throws up his hands and says, okay, you're done. It's over.
He never does.
Never. The pattern is set. They sin, they fall into distress, they cry out for help, and God, in his mercy, sends a judge to rescue them.
And then they're good for a while, and then they do it all over again.
It's this intense history of repetition. But that's the point. His love endures through that predictable cycle. He keeps stepping in, refusing to let them completely destroy themselves.
But even that cycle of rescue wasn't enough for them, was it? That brings us to the next big betrayal. They reject God as their direct king.
Yeah, they demand a human king. They basically say, we want to be like the other nations.
They want to conform to the culture. It's just,
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking to read.
It really is. It was a rejection of the whole theocracy, what made them special. And you can feel God's disappointment in the text. But this is where the paradox of his love is so powerful. He actually sets aside his pride, as the source puts it, and allows the monarchy. He gives them what they ask for.
And not only that, but he immediately reinvests in this flawed human system by establishing the Davidic covenant.
Right. He makes a new powerful promise right through that line of kings they demanded. It's a radical recommitment.
But that system gets tested immediately. And with the most famous moral collapse in the whole story, David, the chosen king, a man after God's own heart, and the whole catastrophe with Bathsheba and Uriah.
And that's the defining question, isn't it? How can the covenant possibly survive that kind of failure at the very top?
So how does it?
O. Palmer Robertson gives a really powerful insight here. God doesn't break the covenant, even with David's horrific sin. Instead, the sin serves a purpose.
What purpose could that possibly serve?
It exposes the absolute limitation of any human king. It screams out the need for the true Messiah. It shows that no human, not even the best one, is enough.
So God wasn't looking for perfect government from David.
No. What he truly desired was a broken spirit, a repentant heart. It was David's repentance, not his perfection, that preserved the covenant for the future.
But the project of human kings just continues to spiral down from there. Solomon, his son, is led astray by foreign women, idolatry.
Ooh.
He completely violates the covenant.
And the tragedy culminates in the nation literally tearing itself in two, the northern and southern kingdoms. It's a total national self-destruction.
At this point, you'd think, okay, now it's over. A shattered nation.
But again, God refuses to give up. He doubles down. He sends countless prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Amos, all of them, to plead with both kingdoms.
So those prophetic books aren't just standalone warnings, they're evidence of his persistence.
Absolutely. Those cries, the warnings, the laments, that's God's enduring struggle to mend this relationship right up to the very last second before judgment finally falls.
Which brings us to the lowest point of all, the exile. The fall of Jerusalem, the temple destroyed, the people dragged off to Babylon. For anyone living through that, it must have felt like the end of the world, the end of every promise.
The ultimate shock. It looked like the covenant had completely and finally failed. But, and this is the revolutionary turn in the whole narrative, this was not the end.
How is that possible?
Even as God, the sovereign ruler of history, allows this to happen, he's still declaring his name through the remaining few. Figures like Daniel, keeping faith deep inside pagan Babylon.
So the suffering wasn't just punishment, it was refinement.
Yes, and out of that deep darkness, after the utter failure of a covenant written on stone tablets, comes the most significant strategic upgrade.
The new covenant.
The new covenant, announced through Jeremiah and Ezekiel in this period of total despair, and this was revolutionary. A law not on stone, but a law written on the heart.
So the failure of the old system directly created the need for and the promise of a superior permanent one.
Exactly. This was God's massive strategic pivot. It prepared the stage for a gospel that could never be contained in just one nation. It was getting ready to reach everyone, fulfilling that original priestly nation calling.
And yet, even after all that, after the miracle of their return from exile, which God orchestrates through King Cyrus of Persia,
Yeah,
the failure continues.
it does. The final books, Ezra, Nehemiah, Malachi, they document what you could call the failed restoration.
What?
There's an initial revival, they rebuild the temple, but as soon as hardship hits, their focus turns inward again. They get preoccupied with their own affairs, their own houses, and they neglect the things of God.
And that leads to this incredibly painful climax in the book of Malachi.
The people are just.
Yeah.
They're completely hardened, disillusioned. They've been through so much, and now they actually challenge God to his face. They ask, when did you love us?
Wow. They've become totally blind to the centuries of his persistence.
Completely blind. Their hearts are closed. And the immediate result of that is the 400 years of silence between the Old and New Testaments.
To a lot of people, that silence feels like God finally walking away.
And that's maybe the most important question to ask. Was it abandonment? And the answer from our sources is a clear no. That silence was the climax of patience.
The climax of patience.
Yes, it was a time of intense global preparation for the fulfillment of the new covenant. God hadn't gone anywhere. His silence was the waiting time of his deepest love for us, getting all the political and spiritual conditions just right for the arrival of the Messiah.
This whole history is so relentless. Reading through all the failure can feel, well, it can feel overwhelming. So let's pivot. How can we, as learners today, read this without just feeling defeated? The sources give us four lenses to use.
Right. And we have to remember this whole narrative, despite the judgment, it's ultimately meant to be a letter of comfort for us. These lenses help us see that.
Okay, let's start with the first one, the character lens. This says don't focus so much on the events, the wars, the names. Focus on who God is in the middle of it all.
Exactly. If you get bogged down in the chronology, you miss the hero of the story. You have to pause and ask, okay, I would have given up on these people a long time ago. Why does God keep giving them another chance?
And when you ask that,
The incredible patience of God, his agape, just jumps off the page. It's hidden between the lines of all that messy history. It turns the history into a biography of God's character.
you love that. Okay, lens number 2 is the mirror lens. This one says we should read this history as an interpretation of failure, not a biography of heroes.
Yes, these books are brutally honest. They show the failures of even the greatest figures, like David. We're meant to use those failures as a mirror for our own weakness.
So the takeaway isn't don't be like David.
No, the takeaway is, if David, a king chosen by God, could fall so badly, it's not surprising that I fall too. The point isn't my ability to stand firm. It's God's covenant that holds me firm, and that turns this history into a huge comfort.
That's a huge perspective shift. Okay, third is the Messiah lens. This is about seeing all 12 of these books as one single story.
A Messiah waiting project. Every time a human king fails, every time the nation collapses, it just heightens the tension and the need for the true king.
So as you're reading, you should be asking.
So when is the real king going to show up? The worse things get, the more necessary Jesus becomes. You have to look for that connection, that link to the New Testament in every disaster. It's all pointing forward.
And the final one, the covenant renewal lens. This one's fascinating. It says God's love isn't just patient, it actually evolves. It gets deeper every time humans fail.
It's a progressive victory of his agape. You can track it. Every time Israel breaks a covenant, God doesn't just reinstate it. He comes back with a better, deeper, more specific promise.
From the Sinai covenant
To the Davidic covenant, and then finally to the permanent, heart-transforming new covenant. It shows this relentless, deepening commitment to humanity.
So for you listening, that really is the crucial takeaway. This whole massive, dark story is holding up a mirror to us, and it's asking, in your own life, in your struggles, are you challenging God? Are you asking, when did you love me?
Because the pattern is just undeniable. Israel failed constantly, but God never abandoned the covenant. That's the whole point. You have to come away from this deep dive knowing that God's enduring agape is so much greater than your repeated weakness.
That's a powerful final thought, but I want to leave you with one more thing to reflect on. If the deepest betrayal was Israel forgetting their mission to be a priestly nation, how does that change how we see those 400 years of silence?
That silence wasn't just a pause for them. It was a time of global preparation, setting the stage for a message that was finally ready to reach the whole world. That's something profound to think about.
It really is. Next time, we're moving from history into the poetic books to explore the story of singing love agape that sings right through suffering and daily life. Thank you for diving deep with us.